The sound of motorcycles echoed across the empty streets of Austin, Texas, that Sunday morning. It wasn't the usual weekend ride. These 97 bikers were not on a joyride, but on a mission of protection. Their destination was St. Mary's Hospital, a quiet facility suddenly caught in the center of national attention. Inside one of its rooms lay a 12-year-old girl named Emily Carter, a child whose life had already seen more pain than most adults ever would. The bikers, known locally as the Guardians of Justice, had vowed that no harm would come to her again. Emily had been admitted 2 days earlier after suffering severe injuries caused by her stepfather, a man now in police custody. The story had quickly reached the local news. A frightened girl, a small-town hospital, and a broken system that had failed her too many times before. But what no one expected was that a group of bikers, men and women once stereotyped as rough and rebellious, would become her most devoted protectors. They had seen too much injustice in their own lives and refused to let another child face fear alone. When the bikers first learned about Emily, it was through a Facebook post shared by a nurse who worked at the hospital. The post wasn't a call for help. It was simply an emotional message expressing heartbreak over Emily's story. Yet within an hour, dozens of bikers began contacting one another, organizing a plan. They knew that Emily's stepfather's friends were rumored to be coming to the hospital to silence her before the trial. The bikers decided to act before anyone else did. They would make sure the hospital became a fortress that no one could breach. By noon, the rumble of engines filled the air as the group arrived at St. Mary's. Doctors and nurses stepped outside, uncertain of what to expect. The leader of the group, Mark Bear Hudson, a towering man with a silver beard and calm eyes, walked straight to the hospital entrance and introduced himself to the head nurse. His voice was steady but firm. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "We're here to make sure that little girl inside feels safe. We'll stay as long as it takes." Within minutes, hospital security coordinated with them, impressed by their discipline and respect. The bikers divided into small teams. Some guarded every entrance, others patrolled the parking lot, while a few stood near the elevators leading to the pediatric ward. They weren't armed, just determined. Their presence alone was enough to deter anyone with bad intentions. Families visiting patients looked on in astonishment. What could have been an intimidating sight instead felt strangely comforting. People took photos, not out of fear but out of admiration. The atmosphere around the hospital shifted. It no longer felt like a place of fear, but of courage. Inside her room, Emily sat quietly by the window, watching as the bikers lined the front entrance. Her small hands clutched a worn-out stuffed bear, her eyes wide but curious. When a nurse explained that the bikers were there to protect her, Emily didn't quite believe it. She had never been protected by adults before, only hurt or ignored. Then through the window, she saw one of the bikers wave at her, a tall woman with a long braid and a leather jacket covered in badges. For the first time in days, Emily smiled. It was small, hesitant, but real. Word about the bikers spread quickly through the town. Reporters began arriving, their cameras rolling as the unusual sight made headlines. 97 bikers surround hospital to protect abused child, one headline read. Within hours, the story hit national television. People across the country watched in amazement as these riders, many of whom had once been judged for their appearance, became symbols of compassion. But the bikers didn't care about cameras or fame. Their only focus was Emily. Every one of them had promised to stay until the court confirmed her safety. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the hospital parking lot glowed with headlights. The bikers took turns resting, drinking coffee, and talking quietly. Some shared their own stories of childhood pain, others of military service or loss. They understood what it meant to be powerless, and they were determined that Emily would never feel that way again. Bear Hudson stood by the hospital entrance, arms crossed, watching over everything. When asked by a reporter why he was doing this, he simply replied, "Because she deserves to sleep without fear tonight." Inside, the nurses noticed a remarkable change in Emily. Her appetite returned. And she even began drawing pictures again. One of them showed a group of bikers standing around a little girl holding a balloon. When a nurse asked who they were, Emily whispered, "My heroes." The hospital staff, who had initially worried about safety, now found comfort in the bikers' presence. Parents visiting their own children brought coffee and food to the riders, thanking them for their service. It became a community effort. Strangers united for one child's peace of mind. As night turned to dawn, the streets around St. Mary's were silent, except for the occasional rumble of engines idling. The bikers kept their promise, staying vigilant through the night. Emily slept peacefully for the first time since her ordeal began. The hospital's chief of security later admitted that there hadn't been a single suspicious attempt to approach the building. The message was clear to everyone who saw it. Kindness can be fierce, and protection can come from the most unexpected places. For Emily, that night would mark the beginning of hope, guarded by 97 angels on wheels. The scene outside St. Mary's Hospital looked like something out of a movie. The line of motorcycles gleamed beneath the early Texas light, and the bikers, still standing guard, refused to leave their posts. Reporters had gathered along the sidewalks, broadcasting live updates as America watched in astonishment. What began as a small act of compassion had turned into a national event. Across the country, people tuned in, wanting to know more about the mysterious group calling themselves the Guardians of Justice. To many, they weren't just bikers anymore. They were symbols of hope. Emily awoke that morning to the gentle sound of engines outside. Her nurse, smiling warmly, opened the blinds to let the sunlight in. "They're still here," she said softly. Emily sat up, pressing her little hand against the window glass. The bikers waved at her again, and she giggled, a sound no one in the hospital had heard before. For a child who had known nothing but fear, this moment of security meant everything. She didn't yet understand the magnitude of what was happening, but she could feel that something in her life had finally changed. Meanwhile, social media exploded with support. Hashtags like Bikers for Emily and Guardians of Justice began trending nationwide. Thousands of Americans posted messages praising the riders' bravery, sharing stories of kindness and protection. Donations began pouring in for Emily's recovery and for child protection charities. Even celebrities and politicians spoke up, calling the bikers real-life heroes. Yet the bikers themselves stayed humble. When reporters asked for interviews, most declined. "We didn't come here to be on TV," one member said. "We came here because that little girl needed family, and now she's got one." As the day went on, the police department coordinated closely with the bikers. The authorities confirmed that Emily's stepfather was officially facing charges of aggravated assault and child endangerment. Still, the threat from his friends lingered, and the bikers refused to leave until justice was secured. The hospital's management, once hesitant, began offering them meals and a place to rest. What was once an act of defiance had become a partnership built on trust. It wasn't just about protecting Emily anymore. It was about showing America what unity could look like. That evening, Bear Hudson stood before the media for the first time. Surrounded by his brothers and sisters in leather, he spoke calmly, his deep voice steady over the hum of idling bikes. "We're not here for fame," he said. "We're here to make sure that little girl inside grows up knowing there are still good people in this world. We'll stand here as long as we need to." His words, carried across television screens, touched millions. Viewers from every state began sending letters, gifts, and words of encouragement to the hospital for Emily and her protectors. Inside her hospital room, Emily's recovery continued. Doctors were amazed by her progress. Her wounds were healing faster than expected, and her spirits had lifted dramatically. One nurse later said, "It's like she drew strength from those bikers outside." Emily spent her afternoons drawing pictures for them, motorcycles, hearts, and rainbows. She told everyone that when she grew up she wanted to be brave like Bear. When Bear himself came to visit her one evening, he knelt beside her bed and said softly, You already are, kiddo. The moment was quiet, yet powerful beyond words. News crews continued to film the hospital grounds, capturing moments of humanity that touched the nation. One viral clip showed a biker kneeling to pray outside the entrance, his helmet resting beside him. Another showed local police officers shaking hands with riders, thanking them for their service. Across America, communities began organizing their own biker groups to support victims of abuse. The Guardians of Justice had unknowingly sparked a nationwide movement. People were no longer focusing on their leather jackets or tattoos, they were focusing on their hearts. It was a transformation that changed public perception forever. A week later, the day of the trial arrived. The courthouse in downtown Austin was packed with reporters, police, and supporters. The bikers rode in together, forming a roaring convoy that stretched for blocks. As Emily's stepfather was escorted inside, he glanced at the crowd of leather-clad riders waiting outside. Their silent presence was more powerful than any words. When the guilty verdict was announced, cheers erupted. The bikers revved their engines in unison, their sound echoing through the city like a symphony of justice. Emily, watching from her hospital window, clapped through tears of joy. After the sentencing, the bikers returned to St. Mary's one last time. The hospital staff gathered outside to thank them. Bear Hudson approached Emily's room, carrying a small gift, a silver locket shaped like a motorcycle wheel. Inside was a tiny inscription, protected by 97 hearts. Emily hugged him tightly, whispering, "Thank you for finding me." Bear smiled and replied, "You found us, sweetheart." It was a farewell filled with both sadness and pride. Though the bikers would ride on to other missions, Emily would forever remain part of their family, their youngest, bravest member. In the weeks that followed, America continued to talk about the event that had restored faith in humanity. Documentaries were made, articles were written, and interviews aired nationwide. But for the Guardians of Justice, it wasn't about recognition. It was about the reminder that even in a divided world, compassion still had power. Emily's story inspired thousands to take action, to stand up for the voiceless, to protect the innocent, and to believe that kindness can be louder than fear. 97 bikers had surrounded a hospital that week, but what they truly surrounded was the heart of a nation.